Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ollie Rock. Joseph Schohl is a 5-time General Counsel and CLO who became a public company GC by the age of 35. With experience spanning Baxter Healthcare, DaVita Kidney Care, and Radiology Partners, Joe has built a career at the intersection of healthcare, law, and leadership. He's also the founder of his firm, General Counsel West, and more recently, the Inside Counsel Academy, a program designed to help in-house lawyers think like business leaders and grow into the next generation of GCs. Joe started his legal career in big law at Milbank and Sidley, earned his JD from Columbia, and later returned to school for an MBA at Northwestern, a move that shaped how he approaches legal work from a business perspective. In this episode, we talk about transitioning from big law to in-house, thinking like a business lawyer, Joe's numerous leadership positions, and how Joe has found fulfillment through coaching and content creation. We hope you enjoy the episode. Hey, Joe, it's great to have you on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
Super excited to dive into your career. Before we dive into our discussion and talk about your incredible career, I do want to ask a quick icebreaker. You've kind of done a lot. You've worked in big law, you've taught, you're a 5-time CLO/General Counsel, you make content and do career coaching. So first question is, which one of these things has been the most fulfilling?
Great question. We're sort of in process of launching Inside Counsel Academy. And I think that has so far been very fulfilling and definitely has the potential to be the most fulfilling thing that I've done in my career. It's sort of a passion project and it's been a lot of fun.
Now let's ask the real question. Which one made you the most money? No, I'm just kidding.
Being a lawyer. That's why I said passion project.
I love it. Yeah, super excited to talk about those two ventures. I mean, you are definitely an entrepreneur and excited to talk about those two. I do want to take it back to your time in undergrad at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where you studied finance, and you're what the modern kids refer to as a KJD, so kindergarten through JD, no gap in between. So I'm curious, what was your plan like when you were studying finance? Did you know you wanted to be a lawyer?
Great question. So KJD, I wrote that down because I hadn't heard that one before. But that's so true. I definitely went straight through. When I decided to major in finance, I did not know that I was going to be a lawyer, although lots of people in my family said you should become a lawyer. They knew I was going to be a lawyer before I knew I was going to be a lawyer. But I chose finance because I thought I was going to be a banker, like a commercial banker. And the reason is it was, this is back in the 1900s, 1980s. And when I saw, you'd sort of write away in the mail with a postage stamp and request companies to send you their annual reports. And I got a bunch of annual reports from lots of different companies, including commercial banks. And I was like, this is kind of the professionalism and success that I would aspire to in my own life and in, the place where I grew up. And I grew up in a blue collar family. And my mom was secretary to lawyers. And so, sort of in my world, that was, if you're going to wear a suit every day and be in a professional environment, I was sort of had my eyes wide open as to where that might take me and lead me. And so banking was was sort of the first thing. Eventually I came around to law.
Yeah, I mean, you speak about finance in some of your other podcasts. You speak about how important it is to know sort of the ins and outs of finance, especially as a public company general counsel. But before we get to that, I am curious, when did things change for you? When did you decide to go to law school? Because you probably started studying for the LSAT, well before your undergrad ended, because you went immediately after. So what changed?
Right. I think what changed is I had a professor ask me what I wanted to do. And I said, I wanted to go into banking. And he said, oh, so you like sales? And I said, no, I want to do banking. he said that's sales. So you better like sales and be, good at sales. And at that time, I wasn't thinking I would be good at sales, didn't have any experience with that, and that was sort of not how I viewed myself as one of my strengths. And so that, kind of caused me to rethink and just get real about what the job would be, not just what it would look like to be in a job like that.
Got it. And then when you did start applying, were you sort of targeting like I guess they call it the T14, or what kind of schools were you targeting for law school?
No, I wasn't. And I wasn't really thinking about it. I mean, I had applied to one undergraduate school, University of Illinois, um, early admissions, and got in. And so I didn't have to send in any other applications. And, it wasn't like it is now where kids, and even I have two older kids who've both, gone to college, where you apply to a bunch of schools with the common application, et cetera. Like each application took a lot of time, and, there was an application fee. And so and I didn't have a lot of money. So I thought, well, I'll apply early admissions and I'll only send the other ones in if I don't get into my first choice. So University of Illinois. And then, and I did well there. I wasn't at the very top of my class. I did well. But then I took the LSAT and I did really well on the LSAT. And so that is when I even became aware of the possibility of going, to one of the top schools.
Got it. Amazing. And so you went to Columbia for law
And then I
school.
applied to one school.
That's
I
crazy. I
applied
mean,
to one law school, and early admissions. And I was very enthusiastic and excited to go to New York City. And so I applied to Columbia, got in sight unseen. And in the fall, or right before school started, I had a friend. We drove out from Chicago to New York with all my stuff in the pickup truck. And I remember coming over the George Washington Bridge into New York, and then getting to Columbia and moving in. And I remember that weekend being a little bit like looking around thinking it might have been good to visit ahead of time. That's not to say that's not to say that I didn't grow to love New York over time. I never chose to make it my home after graduation, but it was a bit of culture shock when I first arrived.
you were all about the early commitment with the early decisions.
Totally right, for better or worse.
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
Later, I went to business school, and I actually applied to two business schools, so I doubled I doubled my applications.
It's just incredible. It's like some of the folks I've spoken with in terms of, I guess, just the way that applications worked, especially, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, now it's like, even if you get a perfect score on the LSAT, perfect GPA, you may not even have a chance at the top 10 or T14 or whatever it might
Is
be.
that right? Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
It's super crazy. And applications are up 30% year over year. So this year is the toughest it's ever been. So it's kind of wild right now.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
But so you went straight into big law, and so I'm
Yep.
curious, how was you went to Milbank in 1993 in Los Angeles? Why did you come from New York to Los Angeles?
Yeah. So my first summer I spent at a firm in Chicago, and uh, and I tell the story. I think I've told the story. I actually didn't get an offer to return, and I talked to them about that, and then I did get an offer. So, but it took some convincing because my um, and I've written about this in a LinkedIn post. I didn't know that no news is not necessarily good news on a project, and I wasn't hitting the mark on what was being asked of me, and I wasn't necessarily being told that. but I could sense something wasn't quite right. And instead of proactively going to the partner and asking for clarification and what I needed to do to deliver, I sort of hoped it would not be important or go away. And it didn't go away, and it was important, right? So it was a huge lesson learned at that stage. And then when I got my letter, that was a very nice letter, but it didn't have at the end, "We're inviting you back next summer." I knew enough to know that wasn't the letter I was hoping for. And so I called the hiring partner and had a long conversation about it. Basically said what I just said now, that, I should have been more proactive, and it's a huge lesson learned. And, my apologies to the partner and to the firm. And that led to, them going back and having another conversation, and then coming back and offering me to come back the next summer. So I knew I had a job in Chicago. Now, my second summer, I decided to explore the rest of the country. So with on-campus interviews and then callbacks, I went to, cities all over the country. And when I went to Los Angeles, I joke about this now because now when I go to LAX, I complain about it. But back then, the first time I landed at LAX, I looked around and I'm seeing, there's palm trees and it's sunny. I'm like, this is for me. and that was the beginning of my my relationship with California. I'd never been to California before, and I'd like to say I've been here ever since. Not quite true. I did go back for a period of 8 years after my first job. My second job was in Chicago, there for 8 years. Moved back to California after that, and I've been out here ever since.
Gotcha. And I want to double click on your conversations at Milbank, Joe. I mean, it might be harder for folks who haven't worked to know to make those kinds of moves and to have those conversations. So what advice would you give to folks who maybe do or don't have work experience to make sure that they're putting their best foot forward during these summer associate positions?
Oh, yeah. And so are you asking about my time at Milbank or my time at the first firm that I worked for back in Chicago?
Oh, those were different firms.
Yeah. So by the time I got to Milbank, my second summer, I was way more savvy about what it took to be successful. and again, I learned the lessons from that first year experience. And part of it was just, how to work in a professional environment and how to have the confidence to, seek more information when I wasn't confident about what was being asked of me. So by the time I landed at Milbank for my second summer, I already had that down. And basically what I was looking for then was, which firm has somebody who I think could really mentor me into being a lawyer. And there was, mid to senior level associate at Milbank. I mean, it was probably mid-level now that I think back on it, who I thought could do that. And then who in fact did do that, who taught me how to be a lawyer.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love how you speak about the importance of mentorship. It's not easy. It's kind of an informal ask. It's not something they teach you in law school, but it sounds like having someone that maybe in a certain sense is going to take you under their wing is super important.
Super important. Yeah. It's sort of unspoken. Is this somebody who, when I'm learning how to be a lawyer, I want to be like them? And then you work really hard to help them. And there's some reciprocity that results from that.
Gotcha. And what kind of work were you doing at Milbank?
I was doing corporate, transactional, both M&A and capital markets.
And do you think the culture is different from nowadays where, I mean, maybe it's more sensationalized that, you're working so much, so many hours.
So that fall of my first year, I mean, one thing we had then that we don't have now is the financial printer. Have you heard of the financial printer?
No.
Right. Okay. So if you're a corporate associate back in the 1990s, um, the financial printer was a place where you would go and work on the prospectus for an offering. So it wasn't just over email or people in their offices. You would go, there'd be a conference room, and you would be working on the document. For public M&A deals, you would do the same thing because you're creating a document that's going out to shareholders. And so that was like the meeting place where you would do this, and it was connected to they were the financial printer, so you were working on changing pages, marking it up. You'd send it to the back. Hours later, it would come back with the changes, and eventually you're done. Sign off on the blue line, and then they print it and mail it out. Um, and so, and you'd have food there. There was a pool table. There were TVs because you're going to spend a lot of time there. Well, the first time I went to the financial printer was like on a Tuesday morning. Go over, here's the address. Go over to the printer. I and another associate were asked to go. We didn't leave there until Friday morning, like a triple all-nighter, I call it. Now it was like middle of the night, Thursday night to Friday morning, and I didn't feel safe driving home. I mean, I was sleep deprived, and so I checked into a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Woke up the next morning in my clothes, sitting on the edge of my bed with room service having been ordered and eaten in front of me that I have no recollection of. So, I mean, that's just a fun story. Like, we worked really, really long hours. I would have thought maybe it wasn't like that now. And certainly, like, I never did a triple all-nighter again. That was a one-time thing. That was an extreme version. But, I have a daughter who's a third-year associate, and she's been working hard since the first day at her firm, and she's a corporate and transactions associate. So I do know that people are still working long hours, and there is benefit to that early in your career because you're getting like dog years in terms of training.
Yeah. You speak a lot about the value of that training in other podcasts and publicly. And so it sounds like you're a pretty big advocate of going in as a lawyer after law school, and whether you want to go in-house or be a partner or start your own practice, getting those reps in and getting that training is super important. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, listen, there's a lot of paths that people have taken, that are different paths to success, right? And so this is one path. It's sort of the traditional route, KJD, and then big law firm training really sets you up then to do a lot of things. You can stay at the firm, right, and become a partner. You can go in-house and move towards being the GC, or a lot more people now. It wasn't popular then, but a lot more people now start their own firm,
Gotcha.
at that stage.
Yeah. Joe, I want to ask, why did you go back to Chicago and join another firm about almost 2 years into Milbank?
Yeah, so that was really it was more of a like family personal decision. So I'd gotten married, ready to start a family, didn't necessarily want to do that so far from our own families in Chicago. And so that's, what caused us to move back. I remember going to Chicago for interviews, and wasn't necessarily thinking we would make the move that quickly. But I interviewed with Sidley and Austin, and I loved them. I just remember going from office to office that day. Each person, I thought this really feels like home,
Yeah,
and so I wound up taking a job there.
that's awesome to hear. I mean, you hear about a lot of these firms, to a certain extent, they do the same work, but what separates them is the culture and the people. And it's interesting to hear your anecdote about how that was really true.
100%. And many of those people I met when I went through those interviews there, I'm still in contact with and friends with today.
Incredible. And when did you pivot? I mean, maybe I'm making an assumption, but you focus a lot on healthcare now, and you
Yeah,
went to Baxter Healthcare after. Was that a client of Sidley,
it
or
was.
when did you start focusing on that niche?
Yeah, it was a client of Sidley's, and this gives me the opportunity to share another story of advice that I give people. Um, because when I was working on Baxter as a client, I was working for a partner who is now retired, but was a mentor of mine at Sidley. Um, Somebody I still to this day think very highly of. And when I was recruited for the position, I never told him that I was interviewing there, even though he was the partner who supervised the work. And it was a different, I was working for one group of people there. It's a big company. And so it was a different part of the company that was recruiting me, but different part of the legal department. And it wasn't until I accepted an offer, that I told John that I was going to be going to Baxter. And I remember his reaction was, "Why didn't you tell me? Like I would have helped you, right?" And I've sort of never forgotten that. And I have always, as a boss, tried to make it clear uh, to people, um, that like, you're not going to be mad. You're going to want to help the person. And so, I took that to heart, and then made sure, like, going forward in my career, that I always had transparency with the people I worked for, so that they didn't feel like blindsided or surprised.
I love that. And I think it's unique to big law or law firms because it benefits the firm because you're almost like sending one of your own to go in-house with the client, and that can help continue business, right?
It 100%. And it didn't, I didn't really think of that at the time, right? You're just nervous. Like, you don't want to be derailed from now the plan that you have. And but yeah, and that's exactly how it turned out, because um like, I still have loyalty uh to that firm today, not because I worked there, but because I have such confidence in what they do, from what I saw and how they trained me. um and so that carried over, when I was in house, not only in that position, but when I went on to be general counsel for the first time. um, you know, the person I mentioned, John, was the first call that I made.
Wow. That's incredible. And you were there for 6 years. So can you give me an idea of like how big was the legal team? How big was the company? And you were corporate counsel there. What kind of work you were doing?
Yeah, great. So at Baxter, which probably had 35,000 employees, all around the world. Um, I spent 6 years there, and roughly uh, 2 years in the corporate secretary function, which did the securities work, supported the business development team to the extent it was, corporate wide business development as opposed to business unit business development. So 2 years of that. Then I moved to one of the business units, and I like to say, it was the smallest of their business units, but it was the biggest one they would let me be the mini general counsel of. And it was unlike my first 2 years, which were at the company headquarters. They had a beautiful company headquarters in Deerfield, Illinois, great cafeteria. Because of the nature of my position, I had a lot of contact, not only with the GC, but also the CEO. Played on the company softball team with the CEO and everything. When I switched jobs after 2 years to go to the business unit, it was literally across the highway in, like a pretty modest corporate building, and lost all the trappings that had come with my former job. And it was not a promotion. It was very much a lateral move. I wasn't going to make any more money, but I knew that I was going to gain something more valuable, which was the experience of supporting a business unit and really getting, closer to how the company makes money. And so I did that. At the same time, I decided I wanted to go to business school. And so I was working for the business unit in the day and then going to business school at night. And then I would come back the next morning and have a platform for applying what I learned. Much to the, benefit or chagrin, depending on how you look at it, of my colleagues on the management team when I was like poking around, asking about their stuff that I was learning at school.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, and it's really respectable that you. I mean, it's double the time for the executive or the nighttime program, right? As opposed to 2 years, it's 4 years at Northwestern.
Yeah, it was 4 years, and I had most of the time it meant driving from the suburbs into the city for evening classes. Every now and then I'd get a class in Evanston, which was closer to Deerfield, where I worked. And I did that for 3 years. And then, so now I've been with the company for 5 years. I knew I was going to be finishing business school at the end of the year, and I wanted to get back to California. So the year that I graduated, I actually did my last 2 units from California, like an independent study thing. Because I transferred with the company to where I live now, which is Westlake Village, and started supporting the business development group in the business that was headquartered here in Westlake.
Gotcha.
So that was my 6th year at Baxter.
That's incredible. And so you have this new MBA. You go to DaVita Kidney Care as the VP, General Counsel, and Secretary. So I want to know, like, how did you reframe your pitch or your career equipped with the new MBA to level up, in some ways so quickly?
Yeah, and sometimes, just everything lines up and the universe conspires in your favor. This position had opened up. Somebody gave my name to David Love, who was the recruiter. At that time, he was at Russell Reynolds. Now he's at Spencer Stewart, one of the best recruiters, in the business, and certainly for GC searches, he's top notch. And so I was a long shot because, not only had I not been a GC before, I wasn't even reporting to the GC at Baxter, right? I was 2 levels down. But I was fresh off my MBA, probably at the height of my confidence, more confidence than I have now. And I interviewed for the job, and each successive interview went really well. And I remember, coming home and talking to my wife. First interview, I'm like, went really well. I think I've got about a 10% chance of getting this job. And then I go back, meet some more people. I'm like, maybe I have like a 50% chance. Then when I finally met with the CEO, we really hit it off. And he was somebody who had been not given, but had earned the CEO position at a relatively young age. And I think he thought he would take a chance on me, and he did. And I accepted, and I started that job. Now we're up to around 2004.
Incredible. So the sales skills were actually needed, Joe, that you didn't want to do in college.
Yeah, they developed along the way. So
So I heard also in another podcast that you had a note that you kept with yourself that said you were going to become the general counsel of a public company. And I guess first and foremost, other than maybe the monetary aspect, why was there the focus on the public company?
Oh, I mean, I just saw that as, when you're going into whatever field you're in, wanting to reach your full potential, and so I saw that as, and I had done a lot of public company work at the law firm, and so I sort of saw that as the, you know, the career success that having that as a target would cause me to have to be the best that I could be.
Shoot for the stars, and if you don't make it,
Yeah.
you still land on the moon.
Yeah. And I remember talking to the then chairman of Sidley about it before I moved to California. And, and I said this was my ambition. And he chuckled and he's like, well, nothing like making it super narrow, right? Like
Yeah,
certain
it's
industry, public company, by a certain age. But I did believe, whether that happened or not, that having that as a goal would make me better.
love it. I just it's so inspiring. Like I believe strongly in setting, really crazy goals and just shooting for the stars as well. And to just look back on your career and sort of, I guess, connect the dots in hindsight to see how everything worked out is really inspiring.
Yeah, I wanted to be, once I had chosen law, the best lawyer that I could be. Once I'd gone in-house, the best in-house lawyer I could be. Once I became GC, the best GC I could be. I want to be the best parent I can be. You know, everything, like, you should try to be your best. And I fall short all the time, but that's not the point. Like, the point is having that target. Otherwise, how do we know if we're hitting the mark or missing the mark?
100%. Love it. Let's talk about the more recent updates. So you were at DaVita for 4.5 years or so, and then your entrepreneurship journey really kicked off with General Counsel West, which was an outside general counsel to healthcare companies.
Yep.
So, I mean, how was that taking that leap of faith? I imagine it was quite the risk.
It was. But when you do things like that, like, nobody could talk me out of it. And I had made the decision in 2008. Then the economy starts melting down. I'm staying on because I gave them a long lead time. I remember the conversation really well. It was, hey, I'm not thinking I want my next 4 years to be my last 4 years. Like, it was huge learning experience. I mean, I learned a ton. We had great success. We built a great team, but it took a personal toll. And I remember thinking that, like, I don't want to be in an airplane away from my kids, like, working the kind of hours that I was working, with the kind of stress that I was under, and then wake up and be like, 55 years old and wondering what happened to my life and my relationships, etc. And so I wanted more control and agency around how I was spending my time. And so I thought setting up my own practice would be a vehicle for that.
Gotcha. And how was that journey to? I mean, first, I guess what was the biggest challenge when you first started?
The biggest challenge when I first started was, I hadn't done any business development, or, there was always work to do, whether it was at the firm or whether it was when you're in house. You have a client that has continuous amount of work. The issue isn't do you have enough work, it's do you have too much work. And so, so this was the first time that I didn't have, also the first time professionally that I didn't have a big name behind me that meant something in the world, like a Milbank or Sidley and Austin or Baxter or DaVita. Now it was just Joe. And people were either going to hire me because they wanted Joe, or it wasn't they were doing business with big name firm or company.
Wow. And you've been doing that for 16 years now. And how's that? I know it's hard to sum up in just a few words, but I mean, how has that journey been? And how's the growth of the firm been?
Yeah, it's been incredible. And the journey has been incredible. The growth of the firm, we got to about the size that we're at now in the first few years, and then we've stayed there. People who have been part of the firm will remember, as far back as 10 years ago at the company Christmas party, which includes spouses and kids and everything. So we know each other so well and our families and everything. That the toast that I would give each year was, let's hope this next year is the same as the year we just experienced. It was never about let's double in size or let's grow. It was just, hey, we've got a really good thing going because we have great clients, sophisticated legal work, and we're present to our families in ways that, big law doesn't always afford. And certainly at that time, this was pre-COVID. And so we were in a remote environment where you got your work done when you were able to get it done, and there wasn't FaceTime or coming to an office or anything like that. In pre-COVID, that was a pretty big differentiator for folks. So we attracted a lot of people, like I just described, who had come from big law firms, important in-house positions, and were raising families and wanted to be present to their families. And many, not all, but many of them were working moms.
Incredible. I mean, it's easy to see, why you've succeeded, especially with just the things you prioritize and the differentiation and obviously all your experience. But that's amazing to hear. You did have a position for about 4 or 5 years in between that time at Radiology Partners as a CLO. And there was a bit of a gap there from your last position. So how did that opportunity come up? I mean, were they a client of yours?
Yeah, they were a client, and I started working with them right after they did their first practice acquisition. So there were 6 physicians, and I started work as their outside GC. And over the course of several years, they were growing fast. We were at first growing with them at the firm. That is, more and more attorneys at the firm started to support me as the outside GC at Radiology Partners and pull them away from other work. When that became not enough, we started hiring lawyers inside the company, and they were reporting to me as the outside GC. Company's growing. At some point in there, I went to the CEO and I said, you need a full-time GC. The company needs it. The team needs it to have full-time leadership inside the company. And so, it's time. It's probably a little bit past time. And, he asked me if I'd be interested in the position. I said, I have a lot of interest in the position, but I'm not going to leave the firm. Firm wasn't in a position where it would continue without me at that time. And so I said, but he said, well, will you help find your successor? And I said, I would. So we started the process of doing a search. And as we're talking to recruiters about, the position, it's like it's a great position, right? And I'm hearing this and I'm like, gosh, if there was some way to make it work, I was never going to go back and be a full-time GC again. But if I were ever going to do that, this would have been the opportunity. It was with people I knew for a long time because a bunch of them had come out of DaVita, people I trusted. I really believe in what their mission of transforming radiology, and we're growing so fast. They called it the rocket ship. So one of the board members said, hey, if you get a chance to get on a rocket ship, you get on the rocket ship. All right. So anyway, I talked myself into it. Other people talked me into it. And most importantly, I went to one of the lawyers who had been with me the longest, Carrie, and I asked her if she would be willing to be my partner in the firm and run the firm while I'm gone. And I said, I'll be gone for 4 years and then I'll be back. And I told the CEO at Radiology Partners, I'm going to come for 4 years, then I'm going to go back. So it was all very transparent. I said, in those 4 years, I'm going to build out the legal department, hire and train my successor, and leave you guys in a great place.
Wow.
And 4 years literally to the day, that's what we did.
So good. I just love how everything fell into place and Carrie ran the firm. I was just going to ask, because you said it was in no position to be left. And
Carrie
everything.
totally, she totally stepped up and did an amazing job. And it was a growth opportunity for her. She wasn't sure that she had it in her to do it, and she did. And I knew she did, but I also knew it would be a lot of effort. Like those 4 years, there's a lot of, I took the job, yada, yada, yada. 4 years later, I handed off to my successor. It wasn't, there was a lot in there, right? A lot of hard work for me, for the team, for Carrie at the firm. And there were some changes and some clients left and some clients came. But when I came back, we had a great platform, and then together, we've continued to grow it from there. So it's been good.
Amazing. Awesome, Joe. Well, let's talk about the latest venture, Inside Counsel Academy. And I'll kind of just let you sort of plug it in a way and talk about that. But yeah, it sounds like a new venture that's been taken off.
Yeah, I guess it sort of had its roots in when I was GC. I was very committed to providing professional development opportunities for my team. It had been very important. Professional development is super important to me, right? And so I wanted to provide that for my team, and I would often have at our annual retreats, outside groups come in and do that. And, like we did some Franklin Covey programs, right? And so we do 7 habits. And then in those retreats, the facilitator would be talking about the program. And then I would always be translating, okay, for us, here's what that means, like as inside lawyers. And so I was always thinking like, it'd be great to take all of this professional development and really tailor it specifically to in-house counsel and the unique challenges that we face in that role. So that was sort of the brainchild of what later became Inside Counsel Academy. When I left the full-time role at Radiology Partners, they kept me on for the better part of a year to help coach and mentor my successor. And I really got a lot of fulfillment from that, so much so that I then decided after that to get certified as a coach, like through the International Coaching Federation. So I went through that process, which in some ways was almost like applying to the bar exam again. It was like pretty rigorous, and it definitely made me a better coach and maybe a little bit less just giving advice and a lot more listening and pure coaching. And now I'm the academy sort of in between. There is a training and development component, and then there's a pure coaching component. So those two are combined. And so having gone through that as a coach and then having individual coaching clients, I found that I was talking about a lot of the same things. And I thought, there may be an opportunity here to bring the one-on-one coaching relationship into a group format and have the folks participating not only learning and growing and developing from what I have to say, but from each other. And that is what we call the community program at ICA. That's exactly what it's become. So that's an online, you go through it together with a cohort. It's over a 1 month period. We meet 8 times. And then when you've gone through it, you become part of the alumni group, which then has monthly workshops and coaching opportunities. So that's kind of 50% of ICA. The other 50% is we do in-person workshops for legal departments. So like I would have liked to have had turnkey professional development for the teams specifically designed for in-house counsel. And we talk to the GC ahead of time, who's, forward-thinking GC, who's going to hire us to provide this, about what their team needs more or less of in our offering. And then, so we tailor it, and then we come in and deliver it, and we try to have some fun.
Amazing. What an awesome idea and awesome training program. I worked as an account executive for 7 years, and we had sales trainings like this all the time where experts would come in and do this kind of thing. So, I think there's definitely a place in the market for this, and it sounds like it's already been having huge success. So that's really awesome to hear, Joe.
I love sales training. It's some of the best training now, because like I've come some way from when I was afraid of sales in college.
I'll just wrap by asking a last question, and I'll just open it up to you. And I guess 2 things, whatever one you want to answer. Is there anything you would change about your career, and just reflecting on your career, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
Okay, great. So the 2 most important things to me in life are faith and family. And when I remember those are the 2 most important things to me, life is great. And when I look back and when I've been sort of, when things haven't been great, it's because I've gotten sidetracked by career ambition. And so my advice back to my younger self would be, never forget what's most important to you. And all the things that you want can happen without sacrificing what's most important to you if you let them play out over time. And don't be, I was very ambitious and very impatient. And so the advice that I would give to myself is, be patient and let things play out. Don't try to hurry it, because in accelerating it, you might go through, and I did go through a period of time where priorities were a little bit out of whack.
Incredible. Thank you, Joe. I learned so much on this podcast. Is there any other thing that you want to plug or talk about before we end?
No, but I just want to say how much I admire you for doing this. I think it's when I first heard about what you were doing and listened to the first few episodes, I appreciated how thoughtful you have been about and methodical about how you've approached even, applying to law school, choosing a law school, etc. It's very admirable. And then to have started something like this, where you get to connect with, legal leaders a lot more important than me, and build that network, and also, learn from that group in a way that not only benefits you, but all your listeners as well, is just something I really admire and want to say congratulations.
Thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate it. You put me on my heels a little bit with a compliment. I really appreciate that, Joe. Thank you so much.
No, I mean it. Yeah.
for doing the podcast, and it's been a huge learning experience. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.